My dad shook my hand at the airport. My dad shook my hand at the airport. Not a hug. Not even a pat on the shoulder. A handshake. Kind you give a business associate you barely know. His palm was dry and firm, and when he pulled away, he was already looking past me at the arrivals board like he had somewhere more important to be. I was 23 years old, standing in O'Hare International Airport with 2 suitcases and 4 years of graduate school behind me. I had just flown home from Boston for the first time in 8 months, and my father shook my hand. My mother stood 3 feet behind him, arms crossed, smiling the way she always smiled, with her lips only, never her eyes. My younger brother Zane was on his phone. He did not even look up. I told myself it was fine. I told myself he was just not a physical person, just reserved, just tired from the drive. I told myself a lot of things in that parking garage while my dad loaded my bags into the trunk without asking if I needed help. But here is what I could not explain away. 20 minutes earlier, I had watched from behind the arrivals glass as my parents waited. And when Zane walked out of a different terminal from a weekend trip to a college friend's house, my father had grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled him in like he had been gone for years. A handshake for me. An embrace for him. I had been in Boston for 8 months. Zane had been in Milwaukee for 3 days. That was the moment I understood something I had been circling my entire life without ever quite landing on it. I was not the child who got held. I was the child who was tolerated. And until I made my family understand the difference, I was never going back. To understand why a handshake could break something in me that had been bending for decades, you have to understand what it was like growing up as the older sister in our house in Naperville, Illinois. My parents, Amara and Tariq Siddiqui, came to America from Lahore in their late 20s with almost nothing and built something that looked from the outside like the immigrant success story people write essays about. My father became a civil engineer. My mother ran a tutoring center out of our basement that eventually grew into a real business with 3 locations across the suburbs. They worked hard. They sacrificed. They wanted their children to have every advantage they never did. But love in our house had always been allocated unevenly, and everyone knew it, and no one said it out loud. Zane was the baby. The only son. The one my father talked about at dinner parties with that specific pride that does not need to be earned yet, pride built on potential, on possibility, on the simple fact of being wanted. My father called him the one who will carry the name. He said it like I was in the room. He said it like I was furniture. I was the older one. The girl. The one who was supposed to be grateful for her education and practical about her future and quiet about her disappointments. I was the child who got good grades and was told that is expected. I was the child who won awards and was told, good, do not get arrogant. I was the child who struggled and was told, you need to be stronger than this. Zane once failed 2 classes in a semester, and my father spent an entire Sunday helping him study, ordering pizza, making it a project they did together. I came home with a 3.8 GPA my junior year of high school, and my mother's response was, what happened to the other 0.2? She was not joking. My father's favorite word for me was capable. Not brilliant, not impressive, not loved. Capable. Like I was a useful appliance he was glad to have around. I spent years trying to figure out what I was doing wrong. I tried being more helpful around the house. I tried asking for less. I tried being the daughter who never needed anything. I tried achieving things so large they could not possibly be ignored. None of it worked because the problem was never my performance. Problem was that in my family's emotional world, I occupied a different kind of space than Zane did. He was the sun. I was something they needed to keep the lights on. The worst part was that I could not even be fully angry because I could also see that my parents were not cruel people. They were not the cartoonish kind of bad parents who scream and slam doors. They were the quiet, respectable, community-beloved kind who simply loved one child more and had decided, somewhere below consciousness, that this was fine. Quiet kind of unfairness is the hardest to name. It leaves no bruises. just leaves you standing in an airport parking garage at 23, watching your father close a trunk, and finally understanding that you have been waiting your whole life for something that was never coming. I went to college at Northwestern on a merit scholarship. My mother told the aunties. She mentioned it twice, then moved on. When Zane got into the University of Illinois 4 years later on a combination of grades and my parents' checkbook, she called it a miracle and threw him a party with a tent in the backyard. I was not bitter about Northwestern. I was bitter about the tent. I studied economics and statistics. I liked the precision of it, the way numbers did not lie or make excuses. I had grown up in a house full of soft untruths dressed up as love, and there was something deeply comforting about a world where things either added up or they did not. By sophomore year, I was doing well enough academically that a professor encouraged me to apply for a summer research fellowship at a firm in Boston. I got it. Then I got hired on part-time during my senior year. Then they offered me a full-time position before I had even graduated. I called home to tell my parents. My mother asked if the salary was good. My father asked if Boston was safe. Zane was in the background arguing with someone on a video game. No one asked if I was excited. No one asked if this was what I wanted. No one said they were proud. I moved to Boston in June and spent the first 6 months being too busy to examine how much that call had hurt. Boston was the first place I ever felt like myself. Not the self that had been quietly carved down to fit inside my family's idea of what I should be, the other one. The one who had opinions and took up space and did not automatically apologize for existing. I made friends who asked about my work and remembered the details. I found a running group that met on Sunday mornings along the river. I started cooking properly instead of surviving on campus food. I built something small and solid and entirely mine. And every time I called home, it shrank a little. Not because anything dramatic happened. There were no fights, no explosions. Just the same slow, steady message delivered through every conversation. You are not the interesting one. Zane had changed his major. Zane had joined a fraternity. Zane was thinking about law school. Zane. A constant rotation, while I could have discovered a new element and my mother would have said, "That is nice, Beta. Have you called your grandmother lately?" I stopped calling as often. Then less than that. Then I was calling on Sundays out of obligation and keeping it to 12 minutes because that was the exact amount of time it took before I started feeling like I was disappearing. 8 months in, I came home for a long weekend. 2 suitcases. O'Hare. The arrivals glass. The handshake. I stayed for 4 days, and each one felt like being slowly pressed between 2 surfaces. My mother had redecorated my room as a home office. She had moved my things into boxes without asking, stacked them neatly in the closet, and put a desk where my bed used to be. When I mentioned that it would have been nice to know in advance, she looked at me with genuine confusion and said, "You are not living here anymore." She was technically right. That was what made it so hard to argue. My father and I barely spoke. Not because we fought, because we had nothing to say to each other that had not already been reduced to pleasantries. How is work? How is the apartment? How is the weather in Boston? Fine, cold. He nodded. I nodded. We orbited each other politely like strangers at a function who had been told they were related. Zane was the only one who felt real. He was 20 now, still the same kid who used to steal the last of the cereal and blame it on me, but something had changed, or maybe I had just stopped seeing him through the lens of unfairness long enough to see him clearly. He was funny. He was warm with his friends. He talked to me at night when everyone else had gone to sleep, sitting in the kitchen the way we used to when we were small, and he told me things our parents did not know. He was struggling in school. He was not sure about law. He was scared of disappointing our father and did not know how to say so. I listened. I gave him the same advice I wished someone had given me at 20. "You do not have to be what they decided you were going to be," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Was it that bad for you?" "Growing up, I mean." I thought about it. It was not bad, I said carefully. It was just uneven. He knew what I meant. I could see it in the way he looked away. On the last morning, my mother made breakfast. Paratha, the kind she only made on special occasions. I thought for a second that maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment she was going to say something she had been too proud to say before. Maybe sitting down over food would do what 5 phone calls had not. She slid a plate in front of Zane first, then one to my father. Then she sat down with hers and started eating. She had set 3 places. I stood at the counter and watched her pour the tea, and when she finally looked up and realized I was still standing, something crossed her face. Not guilt. Not even embarrassment. Just the faint irritation of someone who has been interrupted. "Sit anywhere," she said. I pulled a chair from the corner. I ate standing up for a second before I found it. And I thought, I have been pulling my own chair up to this table my entire life. I did not say it out loud. I was still, even then, trying to keep the peace. But something had solidified in me that morning. Not anger, I was past the kind of anger that burns hot and then cools into guilt. This was something quieter. A decision. I went back to Boston. I gave myself 3 months. 3 months to decide what I actually wanted my relationship with my family to look like. Not out of obligation, not out of hope that one day they would finally see me, but out of an honest reckoning with what was and was not possible. The end of 3 months, I did not go home for Eid. I did not announce it dramatically. I did not write a letter or make a speech. I simply did not book a flight. I texted my mother and said I was working on a deadline and would video call on the day. She replied with okay and a prayer emoji. My father did not text at all. Here is what happens when you stop making yourself available to people who have never had to work for your presence. Some of them do not notice. And some of them notice very much and respond in a way that tells you everything about why you needed the distance in the first place. My mother called 3 weeks after Eid. Not to check on me, to tell me that Zane was considering dropping his pre-law courses to pursue business and that my father was upset about it and did I think I could talk to him. I said, "You are calling to ask me to manage Dad's feelings about Zane's choices." She said, "Why are you being difficult?" I said, "Mom, I love you. But I am not available for that right now." The silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "You have changed." I almost said, "I have not changed. I have just stopped pretending." But I did not say that. I just said, "I will talk to you soon," and I hung up. Then I sat in my apartment in Boston with my hands in my lap and felt something unfamiliar move through my chest. Not guilt. Not relief exactly. More like the sensation of standing very straight after years of being slightly hunched. I started therapy around that time. Not because I was falling apart, but because I was finally stable enough to look at the thing clearly and I did not want to do it alone. My therapist's name was Dr. Layla Okafor. She was sharp, warm, and had an extraordinary ability to reflect something back to me in my own words but arranged in a way that suddenly made sense. She was the first person who used the phrase emotional invisible child in a sentence about me. She described it as the child in a family system who is functionally relied upon, for stability, for good behavior, for not needing too much, while being emotionally deprioritized. The child who learns early that her needs are an imposition. The child who becomes so skilled at managing herself that everyone around her mistakes self-sufficiency for not needing anything at all. I had been that child so successfully for so long that even I had almost believed I was fine. Almost. In therapy, I started talking about the handshake. I kept coming back to it, this small, bizarre gesture that should not have meant so much and somehow meant everything. Dr. Okafor listened and then said, "What do you think you needed in that moment?" I knew the answer immediately. It had always been the answer. I needed to be held. Not just at the airport. My whole life. I needed to be held by people who were supposed to hold me, and instead I had gotten a dry, firm, professional handshake and a question about whether I had eaten on the flight. What would it mean, Dr. Okafor asked, to tell them that? I thought about it for weeks. 2 years passed. I am not going to rush through them the way people rush through the hard years in these kinds of stories, as if transformation happens off-screen while you wait for the interesting parts. The 2 years mattered. They were where I actually became the person the ending requires. I got promoted twice at the firm. The second promotion came with a title change and a team of 4 people who reported to me. I was 25 years old managing analysts who were sometimes older than I was, and I learned very quickly that the skills that had made me invisible in my own family, the ability to read a room, to anticipate what people needed, to stay calm under pressure, made me formidably good at my job. I found a therapist I liked even more than the first one. I did not replace Dr. Okafor. I found a second therapist for a specific kind of work she did not specialize in, around family systems and cultural dynamics, because being the child of immigrants in America adds a particular layer of complexity to these stories. You are navigating not just your family but your family's idea of what a daughter is supposed to be in the context of where they came from and what they survived and what they sacrificed. I held all of that with care. I understood my parents were not simply villains. I understood the weight of what they had carried. I did not stop loving them, but I also stopped excusing behavior that hurt me simply because the people doing it had been hurt before. That is a distinction that took me a long time to earn. I made a friend named Priya who became one of the most important people in my life, the kind of friend who shows up at your apartment at 10 p.m. with takeout when she can hear in a text message that you are not okay. Kind who tells you the truth without performing it. I had not had many friendships like that before. I had been too carefully self-contained, too skilled at seeming fine, too afraid of burdening someone with the full weight of myself. Priya made it impossible to hide. She asked too many direct questions. I loved her for it. I also slowly started talking to Zane more. Real conversations, not just the late-night kitchen kind. He had switched to business as promised, and our father had been cold about it for months, and Zane was navigating that disappointment in the same way I always had, by trying to compensate with performance, by doing more, by being useful, by hoping that one day the approval would arrive. I told him what I had learned. Not all at once, but over time, in the way that siblings can teach each other things their parents never could. You cannot earn your way to being loved by someone who has already decided how they see you, I told him once. That is not how it works. You can only decide how much of yourself you are willing to give to that project before you stop. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "When did you stop?" "O'Hare," I said. "Handshake in the parking garage." He said, "I remember that day." I asked him what he remembered about it. "Dad made a comment after," he said. "In the car. He said you seemed different. Cold. Something moved through me that I could not quite name." "What did Mom say?" "Nothing." She changed the subject. Of course she did. It was the beginning of my 3rd year in Boston when my mother called on a Tuesday afternoon, and the tone of her voice was different. Not the practiced lightness she used when she wanted something. Not the tightness she used when she was about to criticize me. Something rawer. Something that got past all the usual defenses before I had time to put them up. "Your father," she started, and then she stopped. My heart clenched. "He is okay," she said quickly. "He is okay, he is fine. But he had they are calling it a cardiac episode. At work. He is in the hospital, he is stable, but Rania I need." She had not called me by my name like that since I was a child. I booked a flight for the next morning. I told Priya, who told me to call her from the hospital. I told my manager, who said take whatever time you need. And I sat in my apartment that night with my hands wrapped around a mug of tea I did not drink, trying to figure out what I was feeling. Fear, yes. My father was 61 years old, and whatever they were calling a cardiac episode, the word cardiac was not a casual word. But underneath the fear was something I was ashamed of for about 10 minutes before I allowed myself to be honest about it. The recognition that this would change things. That crisis has a way of dissolving the carefully maintained pretenses that ordinary life requires. That hospital rooms are not polite places. That whatever my family had been doing, maintaining the surface, keeping the peace, operating as though the dynamics were simply a matter of personality differences and not something that had cost me years of quietly swallowed pain, all of that was about to become impossible to sustain. I was not glad my father was sick. I want to be very clear about that. But I was clear-eyed about what sickness tends to reveal. The hospital in Naperville smelled the way hospitals always smell. Antiseptic and recycled air and the particular kind of quiet that comes when people are trying very hard not to fall apart in public. My mother was in the hallway when I arrived. She looked small. She had always been a large presence, opinionated, energetic, the kind of woman who controlled a room by simply deciding the room was hers, but standing in a hospital corridor in a coat she had clearly put on in a rush, she looked like what she was, a woman in her late 50s who was frightened. She hugged me. Not the formal hug. Not the brief shoulder pat I was accustomed to. She pulled me in and held on, and her hands on my back were shaking slightly, and I stood there and let her and I did not count the seconds. "He is sleeping," she said into my shoulder. "The doctor says he needs to reduce stress." That this was a warning. "A warning," I repeated. "They want to monitor him. He might need a procedure." We went in. My father was in a hospital bed with wires and a monitor and the particular indignity of a hospital gown, and he looked older than I had expected and smaller, and for a moment I forgot everything except that this was my father and I did not want him to die. He opened his eyes when he heard us. He looked at my mother first, then at me. Something moved through his face that I had not seen there before. Not the controlled patriarch expression I had grown up watching. Something younger. Something uncertain. "You came," he said. "Of course I came," I said. Zane arrived 2 hours later. There was no tent this time, no party, no allocation of warmth. We sat in the same small room together, the four of us, and the absence of our usual choreography was almost loud. No one performed. No one redirected. There was nowhere to redirect to. Some point my father asked me about work. He asked actual questions, not the conversational kind designed to confirm that everything was fine, but the kind where he was paying attention to the answers. He asked what my team did. He asked what I was working on. He asked if I liked it. "I do," I said. "I am good at it." He nodded slowly. "I did not know you were managing people." "I have been for almost 2 years." He looked at my mother. She looked at her hands. "Your mother told me you got a promotion," he said. "2 of them." Another silence. "I did not call," he said. It was not quite an apology. But it was not nothing. "No," I said. "You did not." I did not say it with anger. I said it the way you say a fact, plainly, without softening it but also without weaponizing it. There was a man with cardiac monitors attached to him in a hospital bed, and I was not interested in scoring points. But I was also done with the habit of smoothing things over so other people could be comfortable. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something I had never heard from him in 25 years of being his daughter. "I have not been a fair father to you." The room was very quiet. My mother made a small sound. Zane looked at the floor. I did not rush to fill the silence. I did not say it's okay because it was not okay and both of us knew it, and the moment deserved honesty more than comfort. "No," I said finally. "You have not been." He exhaled. Sounded like something long held. "I do not know how to," he stopped. Started again. "I was raised in a way where the sun was the center. I knew it was not fair. I could see it was not fair. And I told myself you were strong enough that it did not matter." I had heard this logic before. From Dr. Okafor, from books, from the quiet part of my own mind where I had spent years excusing the people who hurt me because they had been hurt first. "Dad," I said, "telling yourself I was strong enough is how you avoided feeling guilty." It was not the same as treating me fairly. Closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet at the corners. "I know that," he said. I know. My mother reached across and took my hand. Her grip was tight. I looked at her and she was not performing. She was simply sitting there, holding my hand with the expression of someone who has realized too late that they let too much time pass. Your room, she said quietly. I should have asked. Before I changed it. Yes, I said. You should have. I am sorry, Rania. It was the strangest feeling. Like rain after a drought that has gone on so long you had started to believe that dry was simply how things were. The relief was real. The grief was real too, because apologies that arrive in hospital rooms always carry the weight of everything they come after. But I had spent 2 years in therapy learning to hold complicated feelings without needing to resolve them immediately, and I held them now. I appreciate that, I said. And I meant it. My father had a stent procedure 3 days later. It went well. He came home the following week with a prescription and instructions to rest and a list of dietary changes that my mother took very seriously and that my father complained about exactly as much as a man his age who has just had a cardiac scare can be expected to complain. Zane stayed for a week. I stayed for 10 days. 10 days were not a movie. There was no grand reconciliation scene, no tearful group embrace, no explicit accounting of every wrong and apology issued for each. Real families do not work like that. Real families are messier and slower and more interrupted by prescription pickups and debates about what to have for dinner. But things were different in small, legible ways. My mother knocked on the door of the guest room before entering. My father asked me questions at dinner and waited for the full answer. When I said something that disagreed with something he believed, he did not shut it down. He said, I see what you mean, and kept eating, which is as close to intellectual flexibility as a 61-year-old engineer who has been right about everything for 30 years is likely to manage. On the 8th day, my mother and I sat in the kitchen late at night while everyone else slept. She made chai the way she always made it, with too much cardamom. I wrapped my hands around the cup. I missed you, she said. These last 2 years. You were further. I was protecting myself, I said. I needed to. She looked down at her cup. From us. From the version of me that existed around you. The one that felt like there was something wrong with me. Like I was always just outside the frame. She was quiet for a long time. Your father loved you, she said finally. He does. I know. But love is not enough on its own. Love without attention, without fairness, it is just a word. She turned her cup in her hands. Where did you learn to speak like this? Boston, I said. And therapy. And 2 years of thinking about nothing else. She almost smiled. Therapy, she repeated, in the slightly uncertain way her generation sometimes says it. It helped, I said simply. She nodded. Then she looked at me with something new in her expression. Not just the grief of a woman who is realizing she got things wrong. Something more open than that. Curious. Like she was seeing me, not the useful one, not the capable one, not the one who could handle anything without being asked. But me, Rania, 25 years old and sitting across from her with cardamom tea and a life she had not paid enough attention to. Tell me about Boston, she said. So I told her. I told her about Priya and the running group and the promotion and the apartment with the good light in the morning. I told her about Dr. Okafor and what it had been like to finally have someone sit across from me and say your feelings make sense. I told her about the work and what I was good at and why I loved it. She listened for over an hour. She asked questions. She remembered the names. At one point she said, "You sound like yourself." I did not know how to explain that this was the first time she had heard me be myself. That every other version of me she had encountered was the edited one, the one who had learned to take up exactly as much space as was permitted and not 1 inch more. Instead I just said, yes. I went back to Boston. My father called a week later on a Sunday morning unprompted. He asked how the commute was. He asked if I was eating well. At the end of the call he said, "I am glad you came." Me too, I said. Calls became a thing. Not every week at first and not always long. But real. He asked about my work. He told me things about his own, stories from his engineering career I had never heard because before there had never been space between us for stories. My mother started sending voice messages at unpredictable hours. Sometimes they were logistical. Sometimes they were just her, rambling about a cousin's wedding or something she had read in a magazine or a memory of me as a child that she had apparently been holding and had never thought to share. The memories surprised me most. She remembered things I had forgotten or thought she had not noticed. The science project I had worked on for 3 weeks in 7th grade. Time I had learned to make biryani on my own because I wanted to bring something to a school cultural event and did not want to ask. The way I used to sit at the kitchen table to do my homework with my back very straight and my headphones on, and she had always thought it meant I did not want to be bothered, but maybe, she said slowly in a voice message, maybe I had just been trying to hold myself together. Maybe, I wrote back. But also I just liked the music. She sent a laughing emoji. Then I should have asked. Yes, I wrote. But you can ask now. Zane called me the night after my mother sent that message. He had apparently been following our tentative progress from a distance with the careful attention of someone who grew up in the same house and understood exactly how significant the small things were. I think they are actually trying, he said. I think so too, I said. Is it enough? I thought about it. It is a start, I said. Starts are not nothing. He was quiet. Then I am sorry for not seeing it earlier. When we were growing up. I did not understand what it was like from where you were standing. You were the kid who was being loved, I said. It is hard to see the unfairness when you are on the favored side of it. Still. Thank you for saying it. It has been almost a year since my father's cardiac episode. I am 26 now, and I have been back to Naperville 4 times since the hospital, and each visit is better than the one before in the small, unspectacular ways that real improvement moves. My room is still an office. My mother has not converted it back. That ship has sailed and we have both made peace with it, though she did ask what color I might like for the walls if I ever wanted to make the guest room feel more mine. I told her blue. A few weeks later she texted me a paint swatch. We have not resolved everything. There are still moments when my mother redirects a conversation back to Zane out of habit, and I notice it, and sometimes I let it pass, and sometimes I name it gently, and she catches herself and apologizes, and we move on. There are still moments when my father does not know what to say to me and retreats into silence. But the silence now is different. It is working silence. The silence of someone trying to find the words rather than someone who has decided the words are not necessary. Last month, Zane told me that my father had mentioned my name at a dinner with colleagues. Had mentioned my job, my title, what I was working on. Had said, apparently unprompted, my daughter manages a team in Boston. Zane texted me about it that same night. I sat with my phone in my hand for a while. My daughter manages a team in Boston. Not the capable one. Not the afterthought. Not the child who handled things quietly while the real story was happening somewhere else. My daughter. I did not cry. But something settled in me that had been unsettled for a very long time. Here is what I know now that I did not know at 23, standing in an airport parking garage with a dry handshake still sitting in my palm and a suitcase I had carried myself. I know that the people who love you imperfectly are still capable of learning to love you better. Not always. Not automatically. But sometimes when something cracks the surface open, a hospital room, a silence that goes on long enough to become impossible to maintain, a daughter who simply stops showing up in the way she always has and forces everyone to notice the shape of the space she was filling, sometimes people find a way to look at what they have been doing and understand that they need to do differently. I know that waiting for that moment is not the same as causing it to happen. You cannot make someone see you. You can only make a choice about how long you will remain invisible and what it costs you and when the cost becomes too high. I know that going back is not weakness. I went back to Boston after my father's episode with the same 2 suitcases I had left with, and what was different was not the distance but the terms. I was not the daughter who would fold herself back into the old shape to make everyone comfortable. I was the daughter who had named the problem and was now watching carefully to see if the problem was being taken seriously. It was. It is. Till imperfectly. Till with setbacks. But with genuine effort, which is more than I had before. And I know this. I will not pretend the handshake did not happen. I will not retroactively decide it did not mean what it meant, because the version of me that stood in that parking garage with her heart quietly cracking deserves to be believed. What happened happened. The unfairness was real. The years of being the child who pulled her own chair up to the table, those were real. But they are not the end of the story. I am going home for Eid this year. My mother is making paratha and she has already texted to ask if I want the filling with potatoes or just plain because she remembered that I had a phase in college when I preferred plain. She remembered. She asked. I told her potatoes. She sent a prayer emoji and then a heart. My father will probably be in the kitchen when I arrive. And when I walk through the door, here is what I think will happen. He will stand up from where he was sitting and he will cross the room and he will do something he has done only once in my entire adult life, on a Tuesday in a hospital room with monitors beeping and the truth finally sitting in the air between us. He will open his arms. And this time I will walk into them. Not because everything is fixed. Not because we have resolved every year of quiet unfairness with a few good phone calls and a paint swatch and a story told at someone else's dinner table. But because I am no longer the girl who needed the handshake to crack her open before she could see clearly. I am someone who knows exactly who she is. Who built that knowledge on her own in a city she chose with people who chose her back. Who looked at the shape of what her family had done and did not let it become the shape of herself. My father shook my hand at the airport once. He will not be doing that again. And the reason he will not is not because I forgave him before he earned it. It is because I left. And staying gone long enough to become fully myself was the only way I could ever come back.